Good afternoon, Waterdown, and this is a special video for my 2 genocide classes, and I want to say how much of a pleasure it is to have done these videos with you, and I'm sad this is our last one, and I wish we could be together in our classrooms, but not meant to be. Anyways, it's a beautiful day out there. It's June 1st. Tunnel, you can see the light at the end. You just have a whole project to do, and if you choose to do so, a final test to help raise your mark. Anyways, I've been planning this video for some time, and 2 weeks ago I was thinking about the connections that we can use to look at our world today and to see the lessons that genocide gives us, the lessons that all of the things that we learned in genocide can give us, to give us perspective. What I didn't anticipate, what I couldn't believe, was the events of exactly 1 week ago, and that is the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. I was going to mention earlier, actually, the shooting of the young African-American man in Brunswick, Georgia. That was going to be my lead, but events have overtaken that. I mean, you must be watching this. It's not just a localized problem. It's all throughout the United States, all the major cities. It's even hit Europe with the demonstrations in Toronto. I mean, this is truly a global thing. And it is, one can see some of the things that we've experienced in genocide. Now, no one knows all the facts. There has not been a trial. The officer has been charged, and every side, no matter what political stripe you are, clearly can see that that was completely excessive use of force, and it was murder, and now he's being charged with a third-degree murder. But what caused this? Why did he do it? Was it the inherent racism that America has had for over 400 years with African Americans, between whites and blacks? Is it that? Is it the badge? Is it the power that one human being has over another? I mean, I know you recall the Stanford Prison Experiment, the Zimbardo Experiment from the early 70s. And you learned some lessons about people, about power. So could it be this? We don't know. But what has come out is nothing short of tragic. That the protests that have rocked the United States have turned excessively violent. And you can see these crowds looting, burning, breaking into shops and taking stuff for themselves. Again, we talked about this as well. When people are in a group, they think differently than individual. The individual would never do that. But as a group, it's almost like, and you learn this in genocide, you up the ante. Each action creates, well, let me do this, let me see this. Well, I can do this, you did this, so I can do this. And it is truly an international tragedy that's transpiring south of the border. What COVID has done to people's mindsets, you know, they're cagey enough. You can see this explosive nature in what they're doing. But if you look at our Asian Americans, they're fearful now. I'm going to quote a woman named Tracy Liu, and she was born in China, and I have a picture here. She's this USC football game. She lives in Austin for many years, and she considers herself American. She is American. It's you know, she fit right in. But she says since COVID, she has felt the constant watch, the constant, almost threatening views of people that believe she is responsible for this crisis. There have been, and I'll read this statistic, 1,700 cases since COVID broke, which was 4 months ago. 1,700 cases of anti-Asian American acts of whether it's violence or threatening, from spitting to kicking. It is just awful. In fact, this woman, Tracy, she said, I was living this peaceful existence, and now I've bought a gun because I'm fearful for my life. So ladies and gentlemen, it is a unique world, and I know you have a very specific lens because you took our course, and I think you can see things perhaps more clearly than other people can about the nature of people and what they are capable of doing. Across the globe, I mean, we have so many themes in genocide. One of the other themes was Russia. And that was our second biggest unit, was the genocide of the Ukrainians and Stalin's empire that he built, and then after World War II, the Iron Curtain and the Warsaw Pact, and what communism has wrought onto Europe. Well, in 1989, as you know, the wall fell down. And in fact, those countries that Russia used to own were now independent-minded. NATO, of course, started spreading eastward. And in the 90s, not only did the former Soviet Union, Russia, not only did they go through this loss and economic chaos, they had this sense of the loss of empire, that they had lost their place in the world. And if you remember back to the 1920s, when we were looking at the Weimar Republic and the rise of Adolf Hitler, it's a very similar feeling. You lose a conflict, or you lose a war, in this particular case, the Cold War. You have economic chaos, which was what happened in the Weimar Republic, especially in 1923. You have a sense of national pride being lost. There's a wounded pride, that this desire, and in Russia, it seems to have taken hold of the desire for a strong man to get the place back to where they were, or to get Russia back to the place where they were. There's an amazing reporter. His name is Steven Rosenberg, and he works for BBC. And I love this guy. He's a Russian expert. And Steven Rosenberg has done a great documentary on YouTube. I'm going to include it here. And it's called The Empire Strikes Back, or Russia. It's 45 minutes long, and it is fascinating on how Russia is trying to get their empire back. That they are creeping. They've already invaded the Crimea and in Ukraine, but that they are trying to be, as in the words of a Russian expert, a spoiler. They're trying to spoil it for others. They're trying to use any means necessary so that they can regain their status and their influence. We know that people like Alexander Litvinenko, who was a critic of Vladimir Putin, who was a newspaper reporter living in London, was writing negative articles about Putin. Well, we know that somebody poisoned his tea, put in nuclear isotope, and within 3 days he was dead. I want to show you a before and after picture of Litvinenko, and he said, "Putin's got me." Boris Nemtsov, for example, a few years ago, he was running against Putin as the main rival candidate. He was shot in the back of the head in Red Square. And the list goes on. People who criticize end up mysteriously dead. If you look at what's going on today in the Baltic region, so this is Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, there seems to be almost a misinformation campaign or fake news campaign to stir up dissent or pro-Russian feelings. We have to go back to the Ukraine. When Russia reinvaded the Ukraine, the theory or the idea that was going through Russian Ukrainians' heads were that there was this unseen right-wing fascist conspiracy that was going to unseat or take over, and we had to have Russia as a stabilizing influence. So this Steven Rosenberg came across a similar thing in Latvia, and he found that in this news article, I want to read it to you, it's fascinating, that this news article claimed that Hitler's Mein Kampf was being taken off the shelves because it was being read and it was in huge demand. And in fact, it was more widely read than the Harry Potter series. So Steven Rosenberg said, well, I've got to find this. Is this really true? And so he went to the National Library circulation, and he found that of all the libraries in Latvia, Mein Kampf was requested 139 times in 3 years. In the same amount of time, Harry Potter, the Harry Potter series, was requested 25,000 times. This is complete fake news, but it's there to destabilize. What is the end game in this, right? Russia is trying to get their place back. And of course, the chaos, they want order. And now they are sowing the seeds of chaos in other countries. And you don't really have to look very far to find other themes and concepts from our course. Just look at the news, ladies and gentlemen. China recently cracked down on Hong Kong with a new security law. It also banned vigils and protests to honor the victims of the Tiananmen Square massacre. Recently in Holland, they honored the memories of teenage upstanders.
Even in Austria, where they tried to avoid the resurgence of neo-Nazis visiting Hitler's house, they decided to make it into a police station.
It's very alarming that throughout Europe, in 1989, as we said with Russia, when the wall fell, there was this euphoria of democracy. NATO came in, that they were going to be Western aligned. But slowly, some of those former Russian satellites are now turning. Viktor Orban, who used to be one of the big critics of communism in 1989, but he is now in charge in Hungary. And basically, he is now starting to turn his back on democracy and make Hungary more of an authoritarian country. They believe that, in fact, Hungary is no longer a democracy. It's no longer a place of freedom of speech. In Poland as well, there's a great historian. He works for the University of Ottawa. He's a historian. His name is Jan Grabowski, and he published a book, and I'll put the book, it's called The Hunt for the Jews. And he tells the story in a very, very difficult history of the Holocaust in Poland. We know what a righteous Gentile is. We know the majority of righteous Gentiles are in fact Polish. Great ones like Leopold Soka and Irene Sendler. These are great Polish patriots and they're great heroes. However, Jan Grabowski uncovered some very uncomfortable truths, that there were many Poles who collaborated with the Germans. And this is nothing new. You as genocide students know this. In every occupied country, there were people like at Babi Yar, the Ukrainians who helped. In Belarusia with Defiance, it was the locals who rounded up Jews. Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Czechoslovakia. There were people who saw this as an opportunity to not only advance themselves, but also to make their state a Jew-free state. And so they collaborated with the Germans. Grabowski has received death threats. He has received, the government has tried to get him fired from the University of Ottawa because these anti-Polish remarks. But ladies and gentlemen, we cannot fall for that. We cannot fall for this nationalism to say we're not going to study residential schools because it's anti-Canadian. No, it happened. It happened, ladies and gentlemen. We have to study it. Our children have to study it. Your children have to study it. We cannot turn our back on the ugly truth just because it's uncomfortable and because we're blinded by nationalism. Obama said it perfectly, and I think he said it right. He said, everyone in the world is entitled to their opinion, but no one in the world, he said, is entitled to their own facts. And I think with that, I'm going to leave you, ladies and gentlemen. I just keep watching the news. I can't believe what's going on south of the border. I don't know how this is going to play out. I really do not. But I will say this, ladies and gentlemen. You are students of history. And a few years ago, this historian came to talk to our students. His name was Gwen Dyer. And someone asked him, they said, Mr. Dyer, does history repeat itself? And he said, not exactly. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And ladies and gentlemen, what can I tell you? It's certainly rhyming today. And with that, I wish you great Hope Project. Don't panic, don't stress, be happy, and be well, ladies and gentlemen. And make sure you get out and enjoy this weather. Till next time, I'll see you again.